The city lay in ruins. What once was Jerusalem's proud skyline of towering walls and the Golden Temple now stood in haunting silence. Smoke curled upwards from smoldering rubble, the faint scent of ash mingling with the stench of decay. It was a city that had once been the pride of nations, now reduced to rubble, its people exiled, its streets lifeless. At the center of this desolation stood a lone figure, Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. His tattered cloak flapped in the wind as he surveyed the devastation. He had warned them, pleaded with kings and priests alike, but his cries had been drowned by the allure of idols and political alliances. Now, the consequences of their rebellion against God lay before him in stark reality.
Jeremiah raised his arms toward the heavens, tears streaking his weathered face. "How lonely sits the city that was full of people," he cried, his voice cracking. "She has become like a widow who once was great among the nations." His lament was not just for the physical destruction, but for the spiritual decay of his people, a decay that had led to this judgment. As he walked through the empty streets, visions of the past played in his mind. Children laughing, merchants calling out in the marketplace, priests leading songs of worship. All gone. In their place, silence. He began to chant the verses that would later become known as Lamentations. Flashback, the nation's downfall. Jeremiah's memories turned to the days leading up to this catastrophe. He remembered standing before King Zedekiah, his voice trembling yet firm. "Turn back to the Lord," he had pleaded. "The Babylonians are coming as instruments of God's wrath. Surrender, and he may yet spare the city." But the king, swayed by pride and false prophets, had laughed him off. The Lord would not allow his holy city to fall, they had said. Jeremiah had left the palace that day with a heavy heart, knowing their arrogance would lead to ruin. In the days that followed, he watched as the Babylonian army encircled the city. Food grew scarce, and the people's cries of hunger pierced the night. Mothers wept over dying children, fathers stared helplessly at empty granaries. Yet still, the leaders refused to repent. The climax, the fall of Jerusalem. The breaking point came when the Babylonians breached the walls. The screams of the people were deafening as soldiers stormed the streets, slaying without mercy. The temple, God's dwelling place among his people, was set aflame. The sacred artifacts were looted, and the Ark of the Covenant disappeared into history. Jeremiah had been captured but spared, his warnings vindicated in the eyes of the conquerors. Yet there was no satisfaction in being right. He had seen mothers eating their own children out of desperation, priests slaughtered at the altar, and the city he loved reduced to rubble. A song of grief and hope. Now, standing amidst the ruins, Jeremiah's voice echoed through the desolate streets. "The Lord is righteous, yet I rebelled against his command. Hear, O peoples, and see my pain." He fell to his knees, clutching the dirt of the once holy ground. And yet, in the depth of his sorrow, a glimmer of hope remained. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, his mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning, great is your faithfulness. The sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the ruins. Jeremiah stood, his heart heavy but resolute. He knew this was not the end. God's covenant with Israel was unbreakable. Though they suffered now, a remnant would return. The city would be rebuilt, and the Messiah would come. A call to remember. As Jeremiah left the city, his scroll of Lamentations tucked under his arm, he prayed that future generations would read his words and turn back to God before it was too late. Centuries later, his prayers would be answered in part. A man named Jesus would walk these same streets, bringing healing and hope to a broken world. The lament of Jeremiah would become a song of redemption, reminding all who heard it that God's mercy is greater than his wrath, and his faithfulness endures forever. The camera pans out as Jeremiah disappears into the horizon, his silhouette framed by the rising sun. The haunting melody of his lamentation lingers in the air, a timeless reminder of the cost of rebellion and the hope of restoration. For the Lord will not cast off forever, but though he cause grief, he will have compassion according to the abundance of his steadfast love. Lamentations 3 verses 31 to 32.